Yakima police cuts, when public safety becomes a budget line item. In November 2025, voters in Yakima, Washington rejected a $6 million property tax levy by 362 votes. The margin was narrow. The consequences were not. Within weeks, the city finalized a budget that eliminated $3 million from the police department. For a city of 97,000 people, where violent crime runs 65% higher than the national average, this represented a fundamental reduction in public safety capacity. The decision affects business owners waiting for officers to respond when someone refuses to leave their property, neighborhoods where abandoned cars will sit longer, and residents calling for help in a city already operating at half the recommended officer-to-citizen ratio. On January 1st, 2026, those cuts took effect. 73% of eligible voters stayed home on election day. The 27% who participated made the decision for everyone. The warnings came months before the vote. In July 2025, as the city council debated whether to place the levy on the ballot, Police Chief Sean Boyle detailed what a $3 million cut would mean. He said it would eliminate 12 officer positions, 1 sergeant, 4 community service officers, crime analysts, and the entire proactive policing unit that had spent years reducing complaints in problem areas downtown. He warned that specialty units would be gutted to maintain basic patrol coverage. Boyle said in November 2025 that this is going to be a drastic hit to the police department. He said he had worked there for 30 years, that they had always tried to do the best they could and would continue to do that, but that there were things they would not be able to do. He provided specific figures. The officer-to-citizen ratio would fall to 1.2 officers per 1,000 residents. The recommended ratio is 2.4. Yakima would be operating at half capacity in a city where the crime rate sits 22% above the national average. Finance Director Craig Warner explained the cost to voters. For the owner of a home valued at $356,000, the levy would cost $14.90 per month, $178.80 per year. The alternative was cuts that would reshape public safety across the city. Fire Chief Aaron Markham warned that his department would lose Station 92 in West Valley, reducing the city to 4 fire stations and increasing response times. He noted that 89% of the fire budget goes to personnel, meaning cuts would come directly from staffing levels. The department would fall to within 3 people of its 1990 staffing levels, despite serving a substantially larger population. Deputy Mayor Matt Brown summarized the broader problem in a council meeting. The macro-level view of what this is that even $9 million of cuts, or the taxes, we're still in the same situation come 2027 and 2028. The structural budget problem extended beyond 2026. The council placed the levy on the ballot. Yakima residents received detailed information about what the tax would cost and what the cuts would mean. On November 5th, 2025, voters decided. The levy labeled Proposition 1 on the ballot failed, with 51.4% voting no and 48.6% voting yes. The margin was 362 votes out of more than 12,000 cast. Voter turnout was 27%. In a city of 97,000 people facing a $9 million budget deficit and the prospect of cuts to police, fire, and parks, 73% of registered voters did not participate. Roughly 1 in 4 eligible voters determined the outcome. According to Yakima County Auditor's Office data, 31,422 ballots had been counted, with 3,200 still on hand. The final tally confirmed the failure. On December 2nd, 2025, the City Council finalized the 2026 budget with $6 million in cuts. $3 million came from the police department, $1.75 million from fire, $1.4 million from parks and recreation. Earlier in the year, the council had already approved $3 million in reductions, bringing the total to $9 million. The police department cuts included 12 officer positions, 1 sergeant, 4 community service officers, 1 analyst, and 1 analyst supervisor. Reductions to radio purchasing funds, cuts to the contract with the Yakima Humane Society, and the elimination of the proactive policing unit that had been addressing quality of life issues across the city. In early December, the city council voted to increase utility taxes from 20% to 21% in a last-minute attempt to soften the blow. The increase would generate $600,000 annually and was absorbed by the city rather than passed directly to consumers. It included a sunset clause of 3 years. That $600,000 saved some positions. The proactive policing unit was preserved. All 4 community service officer positions were kept. 2 analyst positions remained. 5 of the 6 employees originally set for layoffs retained their jobs. 13 vacant officer positions were eliminated. The analyst supervisor was cut. The reductions to equipment and contracts remained. Yakima entered 2026 with 124 budgeted officers, the lowest level since the department had 145 in 2015. As the city's population grew, its police force shrank. Yakima is not a low-crime city. The violent crime rate is 612 per 100,000 people, 65% higher than the national average. There were 589 violent crimes in the most recent reporting year. Property crime runs 16% above the national average with nearly 2,000 incidents. Residents have a 1 in 184 chance of being the victim of a violent crime each year. Compared to other cities in Washington, Yakima ranks 113th safest out of 171. Nationally, it ranks safer than only 10% of American cities. The police department just lost capacity in this environment. Chief Boyle explained the direct consequences. He said where the effects will be felt is in staffing of the patrol division. Those are the men and women who drive the black and white police cars. They respond to 911 emergency calls, and when people call for help, they have to go. So you are going to see reductions in some specialty units. The department now has 124 budgeted officers. Only 80% of those are deployable at any given time because of training, injuries, and paid leave. That leaves roughly 100 officers available across all shifts to serve a city of nearly 100,000 people. The proactive policing unit that was initially slated for elimination had spent years addressing quality of life issues. Nuisance properties, homeless response, problem areas downtown, particularly along Natchez Avenue. Sergeant Patrick Schutt, who supervised the unit, explained their role. He said if there is a marked patrol vehicle going through the area, it is a crime deterrent, and a lot of our patrol officers are out there being proactive. The unit did not respond to emergency calls. They built their own caseloads and addressed larger issues before they escalated. Captain Chad Janis described them as a Swiss Army knife of officers, ready to handle whatever came their way. Chief Boyle was explicit about what their loss would have meant before the utility tax saved them. He said business owners who have somebody unwanted at their business are going to have to call 911, or call the main line at the police department and wait for a police officer to respond, rather than us proactively going out and moving them along every morning. Businesses that previously had officers proactively addressing recurring problems will now compete with emergency calls for response time. The officer who used to move along someone causing issues at a downtown business is now on patrol, responding to higher priority calls. The 4 community service officers handle different but equally tangible work: parking enforcement, animal control, abandoned vehicles. These are the quality of life issues that make neighborhoods feel maintained or neglected. Chief Boyle noted that these officers handle the abandoned cars that are in your neighborhoods. When those positions were slated for elimination, it meant cars would sit longer on residential streets, animal control calls would go unanswered or face delays, and parking violations would go unenforced. The utility tax saved those positions. but 13 vacant officer slots were still eliminated, and those represent recruitment capacity that the department no longer has. In a region where departments compete for qualified candidates, Yakima removed 13 potential positions from its staffing pipeline. Chief Boyle addressed the human cost of the cuts beyond service levels. He said that is the human side of this budget conversation that is left out. These are humans we are talking about. These are humans who came to Yakima for an opportunity to do something they really love. And now we have to tell them that we no longer have the ability to sustain your employment here. The eliminated analyst supervisor position affects operational capacity. Crime analysis helps departments allocate resources efficiently, identify patterns, and respond strategically rather than reactively. Losing that supervisory capacity means less coordination and less analytical support for the officers still on the street. The overtime question remains unresolved. In 2024, the department logged 9,096 hours of overtime at a cost of approximately $729,000. That overtime was necessary to maintain minimum shift requirements. With fewer officers, that overtime burden will either increase or service levels will decline. If overtime increases, the city pays more despite having fewer officers. If it does not, response times lengthen, and some calls receive lower priority. For residents, this means waiting for an officer to respond to a non-emergency call, waiting for follow-up on a property crime, waiting for someone to address the recurring issue that makes a neighborhood feel less safe. The fire department cuts compound the problem. Station 92 in West Valley is closing. Chief Markham explained that even though he does not anticipate immediate layoffs due to vacancies, the department has zero relief factor when a firefighter is injured or ill. They rely on overtime to maintain required staffing levels. The station closure will increase response times in West Valley. It may also affect the city's fire rating when it comes up for review in 2.5 years, which would mean higher insurance premiums for homeowners and businesses. Chief Markham noted that unfortunately, the cost may still be there, just not from the city of Yakima. If insurance rates rise because of a lower fire rating, residents pay the difference. The park's cuts affect quality of life. $1.4 million removed from parks and recreation means 16% less maintenance. Public Works Director Scott Schaefer was direct about the consequences. He warned that the 16% reduction in park maintenance is going to disturb a lot of people because the city will see a lot more graffiti and garbage in the parks. Neglected parks affect property values, and they signal disinvestment. In a city with a 17% poverty rate and a median household income below $60,000, these signals matter. Neighborhoods decline incrementally. Yakima's budget pressure has been building for a decade. In 2015, the department had 145 budgeted officers. By 2025, that number had fallen to 137, with only 127 positions actually filled. In 2026, after the cuts, the city budgets for 124 officers. Over a decade, as Yakima's population increased by 9%, the police department shrank by 14%. The overtime data reflects a department stretched beyond sustainable staffing levels. $729,000 were spent in 2024 just to maintain minimum shift requirements. Chief Boyle acknowledged this, saying they continually pay attention to the budget and to resources, especially when officers are injured or on medical leave. The city's last property tax levy increase was in 1984, according to a council-appointed citizens committee. That means 41 years without asking voters to raise property taxes for city services. During that time, costs increased, population grew, and demands on city services expanded. The gap between revenue and expenditure became unsustainable. Yakima hit that point in 2025. Levy proponents framed the measure as a choice between funding and cuts. They said Yakima is facing a budget shortfall that puts essential services at risk, and they argued Proposition 1 would provide the funding needed to keep Yakima safe, clean, and thriving. Opponents argued for budget discipline and said the real issue was unaffordable budgets filled with wasteful spending. They suggested the city could optimize existing funds by streamlining operations, reducing administrative overhead, and negotiating better contracts. On December 2, 2025, the City Council finalized a budget with $6 million in cuts because the revenue to cover the gap was not approved. Local property owner Kenton Gartell testified in July that you cannot keep taxing the poor to solve budgetary problems because the poor are already poor and cannot afford another dollar. He added that many people cannot even afford Starbucks. 17% of Yakima lives in poverty. The median household income is $59,228. Only 53.5% of residents own their homes, meaning nearly half are renters who would likely absorb tax increases through higher rent. The city's economic fragility is real. So is the crime rate, and so are the response times. The city is operating a police department at roughly half the recommended officer to citizen ratio in a community with violent crime 65% above the national average. As of January 2026, Yakima operates with 124 budgeted police officers, approximately 100 of whom are deployable at any given time. The proactive policing unit survived, though its supervisor position was eliminated. Community service officers remain on the job, but 13 officer positions that could have been filled are now permanently removed from the budget. Chief Boyle summarized the long-term challenge, saying he would like to see the council, the city manager, and others look for revenue sources to expand public safety, not just police, but fire, the court system, and the prosecutors, in order to provide a criminal justice system that keeps the community safe. The utility tax increase that saved some positions includes a sunset clause. It expires in 3 years. Deputy Mayor Brown warned that even with $9 million in cuts or the levy, the city would face the same structural problem in 2027 and 2028. The budget crisis is not resolved. It is deferred. Fire Chief Markham reflected on the levy's failure and said that people who did not vote missed an opportunity to have a voice in public safety. Turnout was 27%, which meant the decision about Yakima's public safety capacity was made by a minority of residents. A 362 vote margin suggests a different outcome was within reach if more people had participated. City Manager Vicky Baker emphasized that the $3 million in cuts had been finalized months before, and that the levy was specifically designed to address the remaining $6 million gap. She said there has already been $3 million that the council went through and created as a cut package. The council sent a levy to the ballot for $6 million. The city faced a $9 million budget gap, and $3 million in cuts were required. The $6 million measure was put to the voters, and the voters declined to approve it. For Yakima residents, the consequences are now operational. When a business owner calls about someone refusing to leave their property, the wait will be longer. When a resident reports an abandoned vehicle, the response will be slower. When neighborhood issues that once received proactive attention begin to compound, fewer resources exist to address them. In a city that already ranks safer than only 10% of American cities, public safety capacity just contracted further. Fire Station 92 in West Valley is closed. Response times in that area are longer. The department operates closer to 1990 staffing levels, despite serving a substantially larger population. Parks maintenance is reduced by 16%. Mayor Patricia Byers, who voted in favor of the levy, said she was grateful for all the people who voted. She said she thought the council did the right thing by educating residents and then putting the question to them about whether they would support the levy for necessary services. The question was answered. The consequences are unfolding. In 2027 and 2028, Yakima will face the same structural budget pressures with fewer resources than it had before.